Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Jaimee and I are so excited to do our number 4 recording of It's Okay Until It's Not. And our topic today is so coincidentally perfect. We're going to be talking today about courage. No matter when you're listening to this podcast, whether it's a year from now, 5 years from now, but today, as we're recording it, it happens to be the fall equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere of 2020, which to me, and it's also the beginning of Libra season. So it's all about finding balance, letting go. And to me, you have to have courage to even sit with yourself, to reflect, to have those things. So I'm pretty excited about how perfectly our topic worked out today, which is, again, courage.
You know, the root word of coincidence is coincide, which I think is like, I could just stop right there and be like, that's enough. It's,
Yeah.
it's perfect. Just perfect.
It's always perfect, totally perfect. And having that mindset actually of everything happens for a reason, or it's actually all perfect, has really actually been my saving grace for some of the traumas that I've gone through in my life. Because that used to piss me off when people would say that to me.
Yeah. I really feel like I feel like
Really?
when all of a sudden the topic just shifted a little bit. Like we could probably make it's okay, make an entire topic about everything happens for a reason, but the word in itself says everything. So it's not like you can pick and choose and say, well, this is happening because it's divine, and this is happening for no reason at all. Like this is not supposed to be happening, and so that can't obviously be the case. But let's just say that's another topic for another day.
Let's say that's another topic. But the way it does coincide with courage is I think that no matter what topic you're talking about, whether it's coincidences or like our last topic's acceptance, you still have to have the courage to sit with yourself to even see it. You can live completely blindly and just in a reaction mode all the time, but to actually sit with yourself takes courage.
Yeah, I feel like courage itself could be a topic that spans over like 6 different days or 6 different podcasts, because I feel like there's so many ways that courage arrives, right? Like there's being vulnerable is courageous, and also being strong, which I think is the old way of knowing courage, is that you have to put on your armor and go into battle. But sometimes that battle is about being more quiet and more subtle and more reserved and observing, and like the more subtle attributes, but we don't necessarily always choose to say that that's courageous, because people would rather fight through the times that you need to sit and observe through, right? Like so it's when to know when to put the armor on, as opposed to, or better yet, when to take the armor off. That's courageous, right?
Absolutely, because a lot of people's reaction is to have knee-jerk reactions and confrontation, and they believe that that is courageous. Oh, I told them. I have a family member that's her favorite line is, well, I told them and I told them. And how courageous would it be if you actually didn't tell them, but you actually sat and reflected on that and let another person express themselves?
Yeah.
And you actually listen to them, because sometimes people are going to say things that you don't necessarily want to hear. So to me, it takes a lot of courage to hear, to really sit and listen to somebody else is even courageous. And being open to another point of view takes courage.
Would you agree that courage and fear are like brothers or sisters, or like close family members? So we don't have to put too big of a label on it, but like they're related, like they are hand in hand with each other?
Yes, I think so. I would say the fear is that very sassy child that keeps rearing their head out of their bedroom at night when you've told them 20 times that it's time to go to bed. But they're like, but one more thing that you need to be afraid of. There's just like, I just thought of another thing.
Yeah. So
to help hold you back.
I work with one of my clients, and we go through this exact this scenario is that fear shows up, and sometimes even like last topic, it's in anxiety shows up and it knocks and it knocks and it knocks. And I think the courage in this scenario is one more thing, like invite it in. Like the courage is to say, what do you have to teach me, and what do you have to tell me, and what's so important, or what can I sit to? And sometimes it's not even like the person that's on the Facebook wall that you want to tell off, since nobody's in people's faces right now. They're in their proverbial faces. But I feel like it's your own inner voice that says, I need to be seen and I need to be heard, and to have courage to sit and ask it very literally, what do you have to tell me? Is that
for me brings up this topic of spiritual bypassing, where you hear so many people say, well, just be positive, or get the fearful thoughts out of your head, or just be, and it's like, how do you do that unless you acknowledge it? How do you, and like you just said, it may have something important for you to consider and to listen to, right? But having the courage to see that, rather than just pushing it down until it then comes out later, like a pressure cooker is my analogy. I always think of the Instapot, where it's going to eventually blow, and it might even burn you pretty bad, So you've got to give it some of that space.
Do you have an example? I mean, like a really specific example of how this is played out? Because I feel like part of the plan of why I wanted to do this podcast with you is that I feel like, and we might have said this in the first one or two, but is the point that people see themselves or people see you, anybody outside of them, as hurt, and then the next time they see them is fixed. And I use that word loosely, but like they're no longer hurt anymore. But what goes undefined or unmentioned is quite often the process in between. Like, I think it's a valuable tool for us to say, I experienced a scenario of fear that came in, and it looked like this, and this is what I did. Like, right, the process that I took, I invited it in, and it was this specific fear, perhaps, and then the courage I specifically had until something rectified itself. And it doesn't mean that fear never will exist again. I know that for certain, especially if you say never. It's always going to happen. Never just might as well mean always.
Yes, but, there you
go. But just to show that, like, the courage, the actual physical or mental courage that it took to be with a certain subject, and how, not that it was easy, but that it was worth it, some kind of journey like that.
Well, I have two that pop into my mind instantly. The lighter one was the courage to move away from my family when I was 23. As soon as I graduated from college, I just knew I didn't want to live in Indiana. I knew I didn't want to live in the Midwest. And I left every person, friend, family, every person I knew, and completely just stepped into that and moved away. The way I handled that was I literally did pick a hand, because I don't know if that's a process that we would, but it worked for me, to be really honest with you. It got me out of my head. So I wrote down the places that I would most want to live, and I just did pick a hand until Colorado Springs was the last one. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Cause I'd never been any farther west than, St. Louis, Missouri. So that was pretty courageous. I was absolutely scared to death, driving there, not knowing, trying to get a job and putting together a resume. I was scared to death. So what got me through that was reminding myself that you only live once, and that this calling inside me since high school was to move away. And so that feeling that kept coming up was coming up for a reason. So I listened to that feeling. And then I got some money from graduation, and I was like, okay, so I can afford it. And so I did my little thing and made a plan. And I just did it. I was scared to death, though. I was. And then when I got there, my mind went back and forth. Like, did I make the right decision? Did I not? But yeah, so that was my lighter version. The heavier one was making the decision to take my son William to Germany and get stem cells for his brain injury. This
Wow.
was like 12 years ago. So not many doctors knew about it at all. They were all following it very closely. The neurologist, his pediatrician, um, the rehab doctor in LA, they were all following every step of the way. And they would just sit, they didn't tell me not to, but they would tell me, here's what could happen. So I guess, again, that's how I handle situations, is I just played out the pros and the cons, really.
Yeah.
And that's how I made my decision.
And do it. And is it, I weigh it out,
Just
I
did
see what
it.
the like, yeah, and then do it anyway. Like, I guess what do they say is,
Just do it anyway.
fear is, courage isn't facing or seeing your fear, but doing it anyway. Like one of those, I think that's the adage I remember. I could be very well
I just
paraphrasing.
remember, like, well, and the stem cells one, like for now, when I tell myself to be courageous, like for right now, I'm working on being seen. And I've realized that
Yeah.
I've always hidden. I was the kid in the very back of the class. I didn't want to be picked at gym. I mean, I just have always hated to have even eyes on me, even to the point of birthday parties as a kid stressed me out because everybody would sing happy birthday to me. So that's kind of what I'm working through right now. This particular one, the stem cells, was life or death. It was like, we don't know how his body's going to react. And for me, again, the situation that Will was in at the time, I didn't feel like he was living. I just didn't feel like that was a life.
Yeah.
So the risk
Sure.
outweighed it, and you do it anyway. And I even got physically sick.
Wow.
I'm on a podcast right now, so I'll be off in a minute, Bryce, but you guys can swim.
That's adorable.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that sometimes you just have to at some point follow your intuition, which kind of leads me to a question that I had written down in my notes for you.
Okay.
I'm curious as to your perspective on this, because that's something that I get held up on, is how do you know when something that keeps coming up is your intuition, it's going to be helpful for you, or is it going to be harmful for you? Like, how do you work through that process?
Yeah, that's a real good question. I feel like I've had this conversation a lot, and I don't know if we'll just call it the right answer, but it's the one that settles with me. Is that, to me, intuition is quiet and subtle. It's not the obsessive thoughts that keep, like, to me, and it's very specific. It's in my gut. It's quiet, and it makes you go, what? Like, it says it once, maybe it says it like in a matter of fact. And when I say it says it, it's in my voice, it's in my body. It's not like I hear somebody like the GPS with the British accent. It's not that, which I would kind of love, I think, but it makes me stop in my tracks and think, not even really think, but feel it in a different way and go, that's interesting. And there's never, I think I've heard this on other things before, but there's never a secondary step. It's not like your head that plans the entire future for you based on your past experiences. It's literally, and I use this loosely, but quit your job. And then I'm like, this seems
where did that come from? Right.
Like, I don't have a job right now. I mean, like, it's not, I'm not whoever my employer is. If you're listening, I'm not talking to you. I'm just kidding. But like, you go, this is unusual. And then it makes you, and I say makes loosely, but like it stops you in your tracks. I was talking about this yesterday with a client, and I think it's interesting is that gut feeling, that subtle gut feeling, is the first sign. And this shows up in Ayurveda too, is that if you can detect, there's, not to divert, but it'll converge in a second, but there's like 6 stages of disease in Ayurveda, and it starts off with the first 1 through 4 stages isn't detectable by Western medicine. So it's just subtle by off vibrations in the body. And so like if you can see it on a physical level as like heartburn. Heartburn is a malfunction, right? Something's going wrong, but you go, oh, it's just heartburn, and then you take a Pepcid or whatever people take for heartburn. And then because that's not actually resourcing the actual issue, then it moves to a bigger sign, right? So then the gentle 2x4 gets a little less gentle. And I feel like this happens with our emotions. So if you're not listening to your heartburn, you eventually lead into a heart attack. And if you're lucky to survive a heart attack, then you're able to make really big choices about your life because it has gone from a very subtle nudge into a very big warning, if not the sign for the devastation change. And so I think the intuition works in a similar way, as it starts in your gut and it says, listen to me, and it's quiet and it whispers, and then it turns into you're not listening to me, so I'm going to say something more aggressive, but it doesn't mean it knocks harder in your head.
Right, which, I mean, I think that's why it's so important to find some time every day just to tune in. That way you can start to listen before you get the knock on your head with the 2x4.
Yeah.
Perhaps, Is there noise in the background?
There is, but it's not, to me, it's not distracting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can always move inside if we need to. It's so beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Outside today.
If you're listening to this, you can't see it, but Laura's got a gorgeous backdrop of shrubbery and bright, beautiful sunlight.
Yeah, I should do it more outside more often.
I know.
Besides the kids swimming, to remind you to be, this just kind of made me think of this, watching the kids swim right now, is being courageous enough to play.
Oh my God, no kidding.
I mean, really, like I have, I find myself being too serious sometimes. And I find myself needing to remind myself that it isn't all this serious. And sometimes the answers will actually come if we can disconnect and tap into our joy a little bit, and play a little bit, because it expands our mind. And I think we can actually get even more intuitive hits when we're not so in our head. And playing grounds us. It takes us out of our head and it brings us into that present moment. And it's fun, right? We got to have fun. What the hell are we doing here if we're not allowing some space and time for fun?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. There's like two stories that come to mind, and one has actually led me to the other. But I watched a TED Talk by Shonda Rhimes, and if you don't know who Shonda Rhimes is, then you don't watch nighttime TV. I don't, but I know enough about her. She's written like every nighttime TV show on some channel for the last decade or more, and she's got more accolades than anyone knows what to do with. She's got a lot of pressure on her plate, but she made a very big point in this TED Talk, is that she makes time to play every day, and it's quite often following whatever her children want her to do. And I don't have children to do that with, but like she inspired me just by saying it. And so I didn't know she had time to make children, let alone have them and now play with them.
Children.
So she's got these.
She didn't even have time for that much play.
Right. Like it must have been somebody else doing it, and she calls them her own. I'm just kidding, if Shonda's listening. But so she said that no matter what she's doing, if she's walking out to a business meeting of any sorts, and her kid says, and they were younger at the time, obviously, and they said, I want to play, she drops everything and she plays. She says their attention span is maybe 30 minutes and my meetings can wait. And she says, but I always have the ability to embody more creativity after I check out from the meeting life and I go with my children. So then she mentioned, it's getting a little louder right now.
Okay.
So you know, Laura. She mentioned a book that she had read that when I looked it up, because I was like, this is interesting, and so my logical mind got involved, and she mentioned a book and I looked it up, and it was more like, how many more graphs and charts can we talk about why play is important? So I did a little bit different research, and I was looking for a book that had play as the background, and it spoke playfully to people who should play, right? Which was definitely me. And I read the book, and in the book there was this one example, and it brought me to my knees to understand this, but there was a guy with his 12 sled dogs, and they were up in the Antarctic or north, I don't know where he was, somewhere up in the tundra. That part isn't necessarily the most important detail, but he was up there and he had his 12 dogs, and he saw just slightly in the distance an emaciated polar bear, right? The bear is clearly hungry, clearly. And one of the dogs, or two of the dogs, got loose and they went over to the polar bear, and he had anticipated the polar bear eating his dogs because of how hungry it was. And instead, they played. That it was more important for this emaciated and dying polar bear, literally visceral looking.
Wow.
To
so
play.
What you're saying is, I mean, and that's an innate need, right? I mean, we need
Yes.
water, we need food, and we clearly need play. We clearly need to play. And I think that, you know, we've really forgotten that as
by large.
just
I think
as a whole humanity, and having just the courage to be seen, to express ourselves, because play to me is an expression. And so that can then be even intimate, right? Like, for example, my nieces, when they play, it's an expression of who we truly are on the inside, our authenticity, the way we do imagination, the way we set things up. I can remember as a child playing for hours and playing Barbies and being totally engrossed in their whole scenario, which I came up with very elaborate scenarios because I watched soap operas with my grandma. So you can only imagine the dramatics that took place with my Barbie play. But that's personal, right? Like, I didn't play with the whole neighborhood. I selected a couple friends that I trusted to let into my little inner world. And I had enough courage to show them that side of me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think
because it takes courage to be seen. I am really seeing that.
Okay, so how are you taking this courage up to being seen now? Is it social media? Are you
social media? And I also think, which will be a nice segue into my crystal recommendations. So social media, of course, it's an easy platform to use. It also, I kind of have to anyway for my business, right? For my jewelry. I mean, that's a very visual business. It needs to be seen. But who is the person behind the jewelry, and why is the jewelry so important? And I don't just do jewelry. I also do the coaching, right? And so people want to know who they're going to work with and why they should work with them. So I think being more seen that way for sure. And then in my personal life, speaking my truth.
That's nice.
Is about being more seen and not stuffing it down. And it started small, more with journaling, like you were saying earlier. It's like kind of starting where you're at, sitting with it.
For sure.
And then what you feel comfortable with, and then you can kind of come with your next steps, whatever your plan's going to look like. I'm a Virgo. I like plans. They work for me. Some people don't, but that's the way I do it, is coming up with a plan and sitting with it so that it's not the knee-jerk reactions. And so, like you were teaching us earlier, that it's coming from spirit.
Yeah, and so
intuition.
When you make a plan as a Virgo, I feel like it can go the two ways, right? You make a plan, and then you let plans sit, and you go, I had a plan. Right. And then the courage is to take the step to walk
the action
and to do them. Yeah, for sure.
And that's the hardest part. And of course, it depends on what you're planning. You know, some things are big and some aren't. You know, some is, I'm going to try this new recipe tonight for dinner. So that one's a little bit easier. And then some plans can cause a complete upheaval of your life, and they take a little bit more time and planning and self-talk. A lot of it's self-talk.
Yeah.
What stories you're playing out. And I like to use, I think there's a sun in my eyes. I like to use Aquamarine for that stone of courage and for speaking your truth. I like Tiger's Eye because it's really works with your solar plexus chakra. It's the stone of it's also a stone of courage, the eye of the tiger, and stepping into your power and having the confidence to step in your power, the belief in yourself, because I think a lot of times we cower or shy away from stepping into our power because we don't even truly trust ourselves. And then I love Smokey Quartz, because it's kind of like that releasing, which goes so nicely with this beautiful autumn equinox. You know, kind of, well, I mean, we've got to really shed some layers before the new can come about. Just like, why do you think we do those acid peels or things in our skin? Because we want new, brighter skin to come out. But we've got to get rid of that dead skin first.
Right. So it can be seen, right?
To be seen and to be more vibrant when we are seen.
Right. Right. And I feel like along with being seen is that when you're seen, it is authentic and not caring what people think about you when you're being seen. And I think we talked about this the other night.
First line of my notes.
Oh, really?
First, yes, is the courage to stop being afraid of what could go wrong, think about what could go right, and to stop caring about what other people think. They have no say in your life whatsoever.
Right. And we talked about this off air as friends earlier, and it's just the idea of if you can tell your story, if you can be seen in a way that is authentic, then nobody has anything that they can hold against you. Uh-oh, you're gone.
That's okay. I'm still talking.
Okay. I was like, there you are. So yeah, then nobody can hold it against you if you own your story. Right. Like if you're ready to just express it to the world. So I want to talk about the solar plexus if I can, because it happens to be my most favorite chakra. And it's because it's our power center. And I come from a very powerful place. Like my signs are fiery and such. But if it's visible on you, so like it's your abdomen, and when you look at your own abdomen, it'll tell you something about yourself. It'll tell you that it's how much control or false sense of control of your power that you have. It'll tell you how malleable you are in this world. And as many people that want rock hard six-pack abs, I'm going to tell you that for your life, for the way that you walk through life, it's not safe. It's not, it actually inhibits you from being in the flow of things. And so if you look at the epitome of the Buddha has a very big belly, and it's not because he was overfed.
I am on my way to being a Buddha.
Yeah. It's because he could be malleable within his abdomen. It's because he was able to flow with the circumstances of life. It was because he could control his circumstances in a very healthy way. Control tends to be one of those topics that that are, you know, it's kind of like courage. They see it as one way. Control obviously must be through fear, but it's actually the understanding of and being a part of the, you know, the experience. So when you're in your, you can look, you know, that area, your solar plexus is also the place that you can create a child and hold it in that same spot. You can be overweight, you can be underweight, you could be strong, you could be weak, and all of these point you to perhaps how you are experiencing the sense of courage and empowerment. I don't even want to use the word power, but empowerment in your life, where it's coming from, and it can change. And so,
are you overprotecting yourself? I remember my doctor of Chinese medicine told me that when you have a mushy, squishy, gushy gut, which was my concern at the time, which is why her and I were having this conversation, is that where am I overprotecting myself? Where am I not trusting in the flow of life? Where am I, you know, because I have this protective layer around me, which started to protect my children when I was pregnant. And when was I ready to release some of that and know that that they're safe? For me personally was hard because I didn't feel my child was safe. Right.
Yeah. So there's an overprotection. There is an actual wall that people build between themselves and other people. It's nothing to avoid. I think it's something you're willing to look at as truth as in the moment, then you can start to assess and create different based on the knowing of what it is. the solar plexus is fire. So there's a wonderful lesson that's to be taught here about beliefs. And so if I'm going to make a real quick education on the chakras, if people don't know what the chakras are, and there's 7 of them, 8 if you're counting ethereal. There's 100 million of them if you go deeper, it doesn't matter, but we'll talk about the 7 that everybody knows about. They run the colors of the rainbow. Root is at the bottom and it's red, all the way up to purple or indigo at the crown. But the top or the bottom 4, from root to sacral to solar plexus to heart, come along with elements, right? So there's earth, water, fire, and then air. And these all represent lots of things, how things are manifested in and through your body. But there's a fun little story I like to talk about with beliefs. When you are born, when you were born, because I can't talk about what happens in the womb because I haven't studied that, but when you come out, there's these 2 energies that exist. One is liberating energy and it moves upward, and one is motivating energy and it moves downward. And we're just going to say that those 2 exist. So when you come out and you're newborn, everything is brand new to you, and your eyes are open and you're experiencing the world, you have a whole lot of liberating energy. Everything's moving upward. I'm so curious. And oh, this is a foot. Oh, I'm going to put it in my mouth. Oh, that doesn't feel right. You know, like there's a lot of things. And then one day, people around you, whether it's your parents or society, it doesn't matter, but they start telling you no, which is fine, right? It's part of the process. And then that creates the downward moving energy, and downward moves everything down into the root. And energetically, and it creates a base or a foundation which turn into your beliefs. And so if there are children listening and you don't want to hear about Santa Claus, hit mute now. But I always use Santa Claus as this example. So we all believe in Santa Claus until something happens, right? An older sibling or a schoolmate says, you know, Santa Claus doesn't exist. And so
we can normally all remember when that belief has been shattered.
Well, yeah,
for us,
so
right?
Here's what actually happens. I'll say physically, but it's on an energetic level, is that this root or this foundation in the earth area of your body, your root, has been questioned, right? So it pops up and it goes into the water chakra where it becomes malleable. It becomes a question. Does Santa Claus really exist? And then what'll happen is you say, Mom, does Santa Claus exist? And listen to every mother say, if you believe. And so it thumbs it right back down into your foundation. Now, the next year, Santa Claus time comes around and you walk out and you catch your mom or dad in their robe putting presents under the tree, and immediately the myth is debunked. And all of a sudden, so what happens very quickly is it uproots from the earth. It moves through the water, it gets burned or incinerated by the fire in your solar plexus, and then moved out through air. And then it becomes no longer a belief. And now you have this gaping hole in your root chakra for a new foundation or a new belief to be built. So when you have this courage, which comes from the solar plexus, the manifestations of it look like this. I'm taking the time to question a belief that's been part of my foundation for a long period of time. I'm asking it questions. This could be about any subject, relationships, what's going on in the world today, et cetera, et cetera. It could be anything. It could be small as what color shoes should I wear with these pants? And then you question it. And then when you decide that it is no longer serving you, your solar plexus, you take the courage and the power that you have, the solar plexus incinerates it and then moves it out. And now you have space, right?
Yeah.
So now there's room for new beliefs in your foundation, or you can just leave it spacious. You don't have to fill it with anything. You could just be a spacious, non-daunting believed human being. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Beautiful analogy.
Thanks.
Beautiful. And I feel like that's what we do, though. We're constantly questioning and having, again, the courage to sit with yourself. So I would definitely invite anybody listening to this to challenge yourself. If you could, for even 5 days, just carve out enough time to just sit with yourself and place your hands on that solar plexus area, you know, and what's coming up. Because I notice when I start questioning beliefs, I actually will feel tight there. Or if, like we were talking, like with control too, when you feel like you're losing control of the way reality should have been, or what your beliefs were, and things start looking different, I get tight right there in my solar plexus chakra. So I would definitely pay attention to that. I would be interested. It would be very interesting to see and to go back and look.
I'm going to put this out there now because it's prevalent. And
go ahead.
Us, I feel like if any of us step foot onto Facebook right now or the news, and there is, I don't care honestly what side of the political system you sit on, but there's a certainty that you're only listening to one side.
Yeah, listen to the other. Yep.
And it's, even if you're not going to listen to the other, let me take that back. Let's say listen to the other and feel the feels, because and it's when you get poked by an alternative view, it is your job as a human to sit with why you're feeling that way. Now, your first instinct might be because these people are crazy, or because they don't know what they're talking about, or this is a myth, or da-da-da. You have reasons or excuses, and you're making it about them. The idea is to sit with it and uncover it deeper to what belief you have of why. Now, some people, if you think you're in higher elevated thoughts, some people haven't met you there yet. And it's up to us who think we have higher elevated thoughts to hold space for people who aren't there yet. And that's courageous, is saying that not everybody is there, and may never be. And so it's all about allowing space. And I'm asking this in a very big ask of saying somebody across the political system, but you can do it in your own home with your own family. Instead of just asking them what they want for dinner, ask them, you know, a challenging aspect that you might need to look in the face. And so you could do it with the people you actually love instead of the people that you oppose. But the point is, or you think you oppose, but the point is that you start to see yourself within these people because it exists. And that's super courageous. Like, I think we all know how to go to war with someone. I think that that's a no-brainer. So perhaps this podcast is more about courage of being still and accepting, and
the courage to allow and to accept. And what a beautiful build upon all of our previous podcasts. And having the courage to allow people to have opposing views, but to still have a conversation with them that doesn't include name calling is huge. But I think what you pointed out that I love, Jaimee, was you just have to take a step, whether that's just with your family members first or wherever that is. But take that first step. I'm going to cough.
Okay, you're allowed.
So we need to be.
You're going to cough hard. Okay.
I can feel it from the air out here building.
In through your nose. So, you want me to pause it and then I can splice these together?
Nope, that helped. That actually helped. In through your nose.
Hey, in through your nose. Okay. No pausing necessary. Thank you. I mean, it's something that I continually practice. And when I asked you to provide your story of when courage shows up for you, I feel like I've experienced both. Like, I don't have I can't personally think of a story that stands out that says this is my process. I think perhaps it might have been, the most recent was with my boyfriend, and the ability to let him tell me how we experienced ourselves in a previous ship, and for me to listen with open ears and an open heart. And I realized that even in my best try of our try before was I meant well, but I was protecting myself more than I was loving him. And so this time, fortunately, I have it this time. But what I heard him say, and I know I said these things, and I know I said them with the best intention, and I know that it sounded terribly, because when he said it back, it hurt my own heart, is that I've decided to not protect myself anymore through our relationship, that it's really just about being way open and way vulnerable, and if consequences happen, like I know I lost the relationship in the past because I was too close, too jaded, and too worried about my my vulnerable side, that he would take advantage of that, because it has happened in the past. I'm guessing that's where I learned the behavior from. But instead to drop the armor and love anyway, because really what I have found is that in relationship you just get to express who you are fully with the other, and not wait for them to show it first. Like, I'm here to say, if I can be open and vulnerable and loving, then I'm also holding the space for him to show up in the same way. And if I
paving the way.
Yeah. And if I lead with defense, then he's going to meet me defensive. Like, I don't give him a shot. So I think my most recent bout with that kind of courage is just being more and more and more vulnerable, which means he gets to see all of my emotions that I used to hide so long ago because people would judge me for them. Well, they make me the person that I am. So if you don't like them, that's probably because you haven't identified yourself with your own. So it's not my fault.
And it's creating that space that you were talking about, to either live more spaciously or to allow in people that do fully accept you for who you are and your emotions. Yeah. So by having the courage to be fully seen and to fully express yourself, and it's a process. I think I don't think I'm a courageous person now. I think it's a decision. And it's this process that you go through by bringing just first awareness to it and seeing it and making a decision of, this feels uncomfortable, but I keep hearing this little nudge that says, and it's just a little nudge. It's not an argument, but it's just this little nudge that says, put yourself out there. It's okay. Yeah. And the benefit is you may even help somebody else, right?
Right. I mean, that's like that's a bonus step, a gold star. I don't know if we're giving those out or not, but I feel like, I think the idea is to free ourselves, and then with that, allow others to be free.
Leads the way. Absolutely. I loved it. This was a good one, Jaimee.
I agree. I'm glad we did. One. Yeah. Thanks for stepping into that space for me and everyone else to hear.
Thank you for leading the way.
Oh, well.
If that's the case. We would love to hear from you guys. Podcast number 5. If you have any feedback or comments or something you'd love to hear us to talk about, and Jaimee will drop down links if you want to purchase any of the crystals that we talked about, or to work with either one of us one-on-one.
Yeah, that sounds all right. Good. Thanks for that. Okay, we'll see you next time.
All right, bye.
Bye.